Hi everyone, today we are going to start our new session of enzyme kinetics in which we are going to study about the types of inhibitors. Types of inhibitors. As you guys know, there are two types of inhibitors, competitive and non-competitive inhibitors. And where the competitive inhibitors look like the substrate and they compete with the substrate for the active site. If you guys know about the structure of an enzyme and then having active site where the substrate will attach. And from this side, there will be a formulation and activation, and it will convert into a product. With competitive inhibitor, it just looks like a substrate. It will come and attach on that side, so stopping the V for the substrate. So if the substrate did not attach with the active site, then they will be no product. Okay? So the competitive inhibitors also having the two types. It's a reversible and irreversible. Both are going to attach with active site, but the reversible can be knocked out by adding more substrate or increasing the concentration of substrate. But irreversible can't be knocked out by adding the more substrate or increasing the substrate concentration. Okay? And what is non-competitive inhibitor? These inhibitor does not look like substrate. And secondly, these inhibitors can be attached at any site of enzyme. It could be active site, could be allosteric at any site. Whenever the inhibitor will be attached on the enzyme, then morphologically the active site will be dissolved. And no substrate will become attached with it. So the activity of enzyme will be reduced. Okay? If you guys remember, we already studied about some graphing kinetics, the micros maintain kinetics, and one is a line-level-Berg plot. Okay? In these graphs, we are able to study how to make an estimate, how to identify this graph as about a competitive inhibitor or incompetitive inhibitor. Okay? The second thing, how to identify the competitive inhibitors or non-competitive inhibitors. And these graphs, these kinetics give about the two qualities of the enzyme. One is Vmax, and secondly, half of Vmax. And secondly, we also go through with a constant called the Km. Okay, let's come and identify the bots. Okay, how we are going to identify these x-axis in the Michaels-Menten kinetics. On x-axis we have in just substrate. On the y-axis we have in velocity. Okay, and this part is Km. When the Km the higher value, then it will be equal to half of Vmax. Okay, you already know that thing. And this is the Vmax because we already studied when the hyperbolic graph become flat, it will identify Vmax. Okay? This one is a normal hyperbolic, but this one is competitive inhibitor. Competitive inhibitors. In competitive inhibitors, there are two types, reversible or irreversible, but now we are only studying about the reversible. If you focus here, there is the green line and the orange line on the same way. Okay, there is no distinction, they are touching each other. So this point is the Vmax. So we can say the Vmax will be unchanged. Okay? And second is one more reason, if you get from the concept of competitive inhibitor will be knocked out by increasing the substrate, okay? If you guys can check the Vmax hole here, okay, the substrate and the concentration of substrate phosphatase, then you got the Vmax. After adding the inhibitors, you achieve the Vmax on higher concentration of substrate, okay? Seem like we already studied a competitive inhibitor can be knocked out by increasing the substrate, okay? The Vmax will be unchanged because this is one point the maximum velocity that will be achieved by increasing substrate. Other than if you want to increase, that will only increase by enzyme concentration. Okay. To deviate from the topic now, we will and over next points. If you guys check there, the higher Km. The value of Km is higher. And the substrate is going to increase, the value of Km is also going to increase. So whenever the Km will be increased, the affinity of enzyme will be decreases. This will be a second point. See the fourth and that is a second. And our third point is that you are getting the same effect, okay? For example, it's a 5 gram and this is the 10 grams, okay? On 5 gram, you are getting the same effect. But there was no inhibitor. But after applying some inhibitors, you guys are getting the same effect on the 10 grams. So, basically, the potency will be decreases. Potency will be decreases. Right to the potency means any drug that can be give a maximum effect with the lower dose, okay? Then the effect we are getting on the 5 grams is the same effect we are getting on 10 grams now. So, potency will be decreased. Now we will talk about non-competitive. So we have to gain that kit a bit to get some speed. The blue line you are seeing, the blue line, it is non-competitive. The non-competitive, there's no effect on affinity of enzyme because you guys already know in non-competitive inhibitors, by increasing the substrate on anything, the inhibitor will not knocked out. And enzyme the activity will be decrease because its active site already did not remain same after taking with non-competitive inhibitor because it's irreversible. In simple words, these inhibitors just destroy the enzyme. So, when the number of enzymes are getting less, so you guys already know that is the line, okay, of a normal Vmax, so it is. And after that, inhibitor, the Vmax will be decreases, and so we can make a one point that the non-competitive inhibitors can decrease Vmax. Fine. And secondly, after getting the maximum dose, okay, you are getting this effect. So we can also say it. The non-competitive inhibitors can decrease the efficacy. The efficacy is the maximum effect of any drug. So you guys can see it for the maximum effect of a drug, but after giving a non-competitive inhibitor, the effect is getting decreased. So, we are done with the competitive inhibitors and also non-competitive inhibitors. But the competitive inhibitors having the two types, reversible and irreversible. the irreversible having the same things that we thought about the non-competitive inhibitor. The irreversible also decreases the Vmax. The Km will be unchanged. Affinity will be unchanged. Fine? And now we will talk all the point with line favor book chart. The line with the same the presentation of a hyperbolic curve in the straight line. Okay? If you guys remember the point, the point where the line is getting cross y-axis is equal to Vmax. Understand? And the point where the line is crossing x-axis is equal to Km. It is simple trick to read the graph. When any line is going to cross y-axis is equal to Vmax. If any line is going to cross x-axis, this is Km in the line favor work plot. So the yellow line is a normal, okay? But after adding non-competitive irreversible inhibitors, the Vmax is going up. Okay? Mean the Vmax will be decreases. And if you are going to see this, the Km is unchanged. I will highlight it, but the Km will be unchanged. If you make a focus on the green line is making a theme point with a yellow line. So the Vmax is same. But if you guys focus here, the green line, it just closer to zero, so Km is increasing. So if you see the book, if you read deadlines, the competitive inhibitors growth each other, whereas non-competitive inhibitors do not. And competitive inhibitors increase the Km competitive. It is starting from a C here, COM, but you can make a mnemonic like COM, competitive inhibitors, like it will be increase the Km like that. And these things we already studied, the closer to zero, the y-axis, the higher the Vmax. So, in that graph, I will again elaborate the things. This one is a normal, uninhibited, and I already told you guys when anything is going to cross y-axis, it will be Vmax. If anything is going to cross x-axis, then it will be Km, x-axis, Km, y-axis, Vmax. Now if we edit the competitive inhibitor in a reaction, then of what? Vmax will be remain same. Okay? But our Km will be increases. Already, this line is saying the same thing. If the lines are closer to x-axis, they will be higher Km. And you guys are noticing this. The green line is a closer to O or x-axis. Fine? And if you add the non-competitive inhibitors, their Vmax will be decreased and they are having no effect on K. Fine? This is all about the competitive and non-competitive inhibitors by the relation with mechanism in kinetics and line blood plot, and how we can elaborate these inhibitors by these kinetic theories and all this thing. Finally, this one is a graph. We already studied all the thing. You guys know the competitive inhibitors resemble the substrate, but non-competitive inhibitor don't resemble. Competitive inhibitor, if there's anything competitive, is reversible or irreversible, they will resemble the substrate. And second, they can be knocked out by overcome by an increasing concentration of substrate. Of course, reversible will be do, but irreversible will not, and non-competitive also. They will bind to active site because competitive inhibitors bind to active sites. It is reversible or irreversible, both will bind with active sites, but non-competitive inhibitors did not. Mostly they will bind allosteric sites. Effect on Vmax, we already studied in competitive inhibitors, the Vmax would be unchanged, but in non-competitive or irreversible, the Vmax will be decreased because the number of enzymes getting decreased. Effect on Km, we are increasing the substrate to overcome the enzyme, to overcome the inhibitors, to make the enzyme in good condition. So when we are going to increase the substrate, the Km value will be increased. But in irreversible or non-competitive, we are not using any substrate. So the Km value will be unchanged. And if you talk about the pharmacodynamic potency will be decreased in competitive inhibitor, because when you give a high number of substrate, the enzyme will work same. But in irreversible and non-competitive, the efficacy will be decreased, because when we are disturbing the enzymes, it will not work again as it was doing, so the efficacy will be decreased in both of sites. So that's all about the enzyme kinetics. But I want to make a difference again between the competitive and non-competitive. It is a competitive and it's a non-competitive. The competitive is similar to substrate, and it is not. It binds with the active site, and it's not. And it can be overcome with substrate concentration, but the non-competitive did not. The maximum velocity or the VM remain unchanged in competitive inhibitors, but in non-competitive it will be decreased. In competitive inhibitors, the Km is higher due to overcoming the inhibitor, and we are going to increase the substrate concentration to Km is higher, but in non-competitive inhibitors, the Km will become and remain unchanged. Okay, this is all about this topic. Okay.